Look at that zinnia bed. A few sad, spindly stems, one droopy bloom, leaves dusted white, stalks flopping the second the wind picks up. That's not bad luck, and it's not a bad plant. A handful of small, easy-to-miss decisions are quietly holding it back. Fix them, and that same bed can fill in thick, sturdy, and loaded with color by midsummer. Today we're covering 7 mistakes wrecking your zinnias. Mistake number 2 sounds backwards. You're going to cut the plant on purpose. But that cut won't matter if the roots and light are wrong. Start with mistake number 7. Mistake number 7 happens before the plant even breaks the soil. You dig a hole that feels safe and deep, and you bury the seed like you're protecting it from something. Deeper feels safer. It isn't. Zinnia seeds need darkness to germinate, not depth, and there's a real difference. Bury them too far down, especially into soil that's still cold and damp from spring, and you're smothering the seed instead of protecting it. The seedling burns through its stored energy trying to reach the surface, and if the soil stays cold, it may rot before it gets there. The fix is a 1/4 inch down, no more, covered lightly with fine soil or a light dusting of vermiculite that blocks light without creating a wall to push through. Wait for warm soil, not just warm air, ideally around 70 degrees, checked with a finger a few inches down. Transplanting seedlings instead? Keep them at the same depth they grew in the container. Don't bury the stem thinking it'll anchor better. A cold snap after early sowing can wipe out a whole row. So patience now saves a replant later. Get this right and you'll see even, quick germination within about a week instead of a patchy scatter. But a perfect start still won't save you if what comes up next is crammed in too tight. Mistake number 6 is spacing, and good intentions backfire fast here. You want a full-looking bed, so you plant everything close together, figuring more stems now means more flowers later. It's the opposite. Crowded zinnias grow thinner, not fuller, because every plant is stretching sideways, competing for the same light, and the leaves stay damp and pressed together with no air moving through them. That trapped humidity is exactly what powdery mildew loves. So instead of the full bed you pictured, you get tangled, spindly stems and white dusty patches by midsummer. The fix depends on what you're growing. Dwarf varieties want roughly 8 to 9 inches between plants, while taller cutting types need more room, up to 2 feet. If you already sowed too thick, thin them out, yes, pull some. It feels wasteful, but a thinned row beats a diseased one. In tight spaces, stagger your rows diagonally instead of in straight lines. You get more plants per square foot while still letting air move through. Don't overcorrect into bare gaps either. You want breathing room, not empty dirt. Within a few weeks of proper spacing, you'll notice real daylight between the stems and a sturdier structure overall. Get the spacing right though, and you can still lose the whole show if you've planted it in the wrong spot entirely. Mistake number 5 is where a lot of people quietly compromise without realizing it. You've got a spot with decent morning sun and some afternoon shade from a fence or a tree, and you think, close enough. It isn't. Zinnias treat partial shade like an emergency. The plant reads the lower light as a signal to stretch toward whatever sun it can find, and that stretching costs energy that would otherwise go into buds. That's why a shaded zinnia ends up tall, pale, and leaning, with fewer blooms and weaker stems that flop over in the first strong rain. The fix is simple but non-negotiable. Zinnias want 6 to 8 hours of direct sun. Walk your yard at different times of day before you commit to a bed. And if the spot you love doesn't deliver that much light, move the planting somewhere that does. If your beds are shaded and you can't relocate them, grow zinnias in containers instead, so you can chase the sun around the yard as the season shifts. One exception worth mentioning, in especially hot climates, a little afternoon shade can actually protect the leaves from scorching, so this isn't a rigid rule everywhere. But for most gardens, more light means shorter, sturdier stems that don't need staking, and buds forming thick and close together instead of stretched apart. Getting the light right solves a lot. But it won't matter if the roots underneath are sitting in water they can't escape. Mistake number 4 lives underground, and it's one people create with the best intentions. The plant looks thirsty, leaves droop a bit in the afternoon heat, so you water more, thinking you're helping. But zinnias come from dry, sun-baked hillsides in Mexico and Central America. Wet feet kill them faster than a dry spell ever will. When soil stays soggy, roots are starved of oxygen, and that's exactly the environment root rot organisms need. Above ground, you'll see lower leaves turning yellow, stems going soft near the base, and sometimes a plant that seems fine one day and collapses the next. Before you plant, check how your soil drains, dig a small hole, fill it with water, and time how long it takes to disappear. Still sitting there an hour later? Work in compost to loosen the soil or build a raised bed so excess water has somewhere to go. On heavy clay, containers with real drainage holes are often the simplest fix. Just don't confuse this with underwatering. A wilting zinnia in bone-dry soil needs the opposite response, so check the actual soil, not just the leaves. Get the drainage right, and you'll notice firmer stems that don't collapse after heavy rain, because the roots underneath are finally healthy enough to support everything above. Even well-drained soil, though, can be undone by how you're actually applying the water. Mistake number 3 is about technique, not amount. You grab the hose and spray the whole plant down, leaves and all, because it feels thorough. And honestly, it feels good on a hot day. But wet leaves sitting in the sun, or wet leaves at dusk that never fully dry, are exactly what powdery mildew and bacterial leaf spot are waiting for. Moisture sits on the surface, spores germinate, and splashing water carries the problem from one leaf to the next. That's why you start noticing white, powdery patches, spotted foliage, and blooms that look duller and smaller than they should. The fix is simple. Water at the base of the plant, right at the soil line, not over the top. If you're using a sprinkler, because that's what you've got, run it early in the morning, so leaves have the whole day to dry out before nightfall. A soaker hose or drip line laid along the row does this job automatically, and it's worth the small investment if you're growing more than a few plants. Just make sure you're still getting water down to the root zone. This isn't an excuse to underwater. Clean, dry foliage right through peak summer heat is your sign you've got this one solved. But healthy leaves alone won't multiply your blooms. That takes something a little more drastic. Mistake number 2 is the one I promised you, and it still trips people up because it feels completely wrong. You've got one strong, tall stem heading toward a single big flower, and cutting it off on purpose seems like the last thing you should do. Here's the twist. Removing that top shoot is exactly what forces the plant to branch out. Take away the main growing tip, and the plant redirects its energy into the side buds instead of pushing straight up. So instead of one lonely stem with one bloom, you get several. When your zinnias are around 8 to 12 inches tall, pinch off the top half inch to 1 inch of growth, cutting just above a set of leaves. Your fingers or clean scissors both work fine. This changes how many blooms you get, not how big or colorful they are. So don't expect the flowers themselves to look different. Growing dwarf or landscape varieties? You can usually skip this step, since those tend to branch on their own. Within a week or two, you should see new shoots forming lower down the stem, and once those mature, you'll have a bushier, sturdier plant that's far less likely to flop over in wind or rain. It's a small, free habit that changes the whole shape of the plant. But once you've got all those extra stems and blooms coming in, there's one more habit that decides whether the show keeps going or fizzles out early. Mistake number 1 is the quiet one, the habit that decides how long your whole show lasts. Blooms fade, and you leave them alone because pulling them off feels like extra work for no real benefit. That's the mistake. A spent bloom left on the plant is trying to set seed,
and setting seed tells the plant its job for the season is basically done, so it slows down on producing new flowers. Deadhead. Those faded blooms snip the stem back to just above a leaf node, and you're telling the plant to keep working instead. Do this regularly through the season, not just once, and you'll keep a steady stream of new buds coming instead of watching things taper off by midsummer. If you're growing zinnias for cutting anyway, you're basically doing this step for free. Every time you bring flowers inside, harvesting is deadheading with a bonus. One warning worth remembering: heavy nitrogen feeding can undo all of this by pushing the plant toward leafy growth instead of flowers. So if you fertilize, keep it balanced and follow the label instead of chasing faster results with more product. Stay on top of deadheading through late summer, and you'll notice new buds forming continuously instead of the plant quietly giving up in September. Now put it all together, 7 small habits, and none of them work alone. Get the depth and timing right, and you give the seed a fair shot. Space it properly, and the seedling actually gets the light and air it needs. Put it in full sun, and it won't waste energy stretching. Keep the soil well drained and water at the base, and the roots stay strong enough to support everything above ground. Pinch it early, and you multiply the stems worth deadheading later. You don't need to fix all 7 today. Look at your own zinnias and figure out which symptom actually matches what you're seeing. Leggy and pale points to light, mushy stems point to drainage, one tall stem points to the pinch. Stack the 2 or 3 fixes that actually apply to your plant, and you'll get further than chasing one flashy trick while ignoring the rest. So go check your bed right now. Is it really getting 6 hours of direct sun? And does the soil drain within an hour after rain? Those 2 answers alone will tell you where to start. Let me know in the comments which mistake you just recognized or which one you're trying first. And if your zinnias are still giving you trouble after this, stick around, because there's plenty more where this came from.